So, and as we talk through this, I kind of one part of me thought, well, it would be a great meeting to be having on site, so we can see more specifically what we're talking about. But we were just all there was that in the fall or was that in the summer?
It was after September.
It wasn't in the summer. I think it was probably November or something.
Yeah, I think so too. It was a nice sunny day, surprisingly, but yeah, it was late. It was November, I think.
Right. Yeah, and so, and I guess before we go any further, I think I want to acknowledge that we're missing a member of the committee who was a very excellent contributor to the committee and to Bowen in general. And so I want to acknowledge the great work that was provided there.
By Dennis, yeah.
And
Dennis Wilson has resigned.
Yeah.
And it's also vice chair of the APC. So all very.
Big loss there for sure. Just Liam, just before we go on, let's can we just start with the formalities here and then we'll send it back.
My apologies. Sorry. Diving right in.
Rogue.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Rules. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for giving up your time to do this today. It actually is a pretty important session for us. And this is the agenda for the Mayor Standing Committee on Community Lands, and we're meeting on Thursday, March 4th, 2021. I call the meeting to order, and the first order of business is the approval of the agenda. Any late items? Steph.
There's an on-table presentation provided by the CAO.
By who? Yeah. Okay, we'll take that. So we'll approve the agenda by consensus, if that's all right.
Yep.
Move on to the adoption of the minutes of September 29, 2020, the Mayor Standing Committee on Community Lands meetings. Everybody had a chance to look through that?
Yeah.
That's good. So we'll adopt the minutes, which are an interesting reflection on today's meeting also. But we'll adopt those minutes by consensus. Move on to public comments. Steph, anything?
No.
Anybody out there? Okay, thank you. Now we're going to move into new business. And now I got a phone call here from somebody, 612. I don't know whose number it is. Wonder if I should answer. It could be Fritz, but I think he'd call you, Steph?
Yeah, but maybe he's calling you.
Okay, we'll try and see. No, it's gone. Anyway. Okay, back to new business then. And the first bit of new business is 4.1 Lot 2 expansion for the community center. Liam Edwards. Liam, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks everyone. And thank you, Mayor, for reining me back in and getting this meeting going properly.
I'll just call back that number for a sec here. Go ahead.
Okay. So everybody can see my screen?
Yeah.
Good. So outlined there is the Lot 2 of community lands, and for context, where it says 1041, that is Big School, and the big green patch, if you can see my cursor, is the soccer field.
Yeah.
And essentially, to the right of that is the community center lands that we'll be putting the community center and municipal hall onto. And then to the right of that, area 510 is the rental housing development that's underway right now, which is making good progress. Excuse me. So what we're wanting to talk about today is some advances in the community center project, which are really pushing the need for trying to secure some additional lands to the north. And So what I'm going to do is just skip down to a slide, actually, further in the slide deck here. And this is a bit of an overlay. And if we actually turn this into I'm not sure how to make that happen. I had a transparency there so that you could see the property boundaries underneath, but you can see that this overlay does slightly, if I move it over this way a little bit, it does line up with, this is the property line in light gray above it. And then this is the the fence line property line on this overlay. And oh, actually, there it is there. So what we're thinking about is that as we build out the detailed tender package for the community center, we're getting into an area where we're realizing that the parking is a concern. And we did hear that loud and clear from the public about, how much parking will there be for this facility? Parking always seems to be a concern. And so we've asked the design team to take a look at other options to increase the parking options for us. And so and another reason why we're looking at alternatives for parking is that when we were having to look at the building footprint because there were three constraints that we had to address. One is the original design was based on the previous building code, and we had to bring it up to code. And so that had some impacts on the building footprint. Another constraint was the grant funding required that the building accessibility elements needed to meet or exceed the existing accessibility standards. The original building design did meet all the accessibility standards, but we've taken it to the highest accessibility standards possible so that that also increased the building footprint. And then a need to expand some of the areas in the building for operational requirements for municipal staff in particular also increased the building footprint. The building footprint envelope hasn't increased significantly. But it's mostly been on the municipal hall side and this north wall. And what it's done is constrain the parking allocation that we had in the north end. And so what the design team has come up with is this proposal where we would essentially build in a rough road, like a gravel road, into the north area, which you can tell by these contours is actually quite flat. Relative to the rest of the site where these contours are really tight together. And Jillian, myself, and I think most all of us walked this in the fall. And Jillian and I have been there a number of times more recently. And it is really quite a flat area, an easy area for putting in additional parking. That additional parking would really serve the community center well. So it would, ensure that we've got ample parking for the center. And then there's also discussions that are currently happening between ourselves, the Bowen Children's Center, and the Bowen Island Community School and School District 45 on the need for improved after-school childcare. And there's a real desire to put after-school childcare on the school district site itself. And we haven't landed on where exactly that additional or that after-school childcare facility would go on the school district site. And it hasn't been 100% confirmed that it will actually go on the school district site. But the principal, Scott Slater, is supportive. The school district is supportive of exploring it further, getting as much facts and details as we can. And so one notion that we're having as we develop the community center project is, well, if we need additional parking, and if this after-school childcare facility does go forward, this may service that after-school childcare facility as well. If I move to this slide, you can see that this has the yellow is the community center land. The pink is just one proposed area of the after-school care facility. And again, we have to take this with a big grain of salt because it's, we haven't really been out in the public talking about it. The site itself is not confirmed. We're just really looking at high-level options at this point in time. If that were to become after-school care facility, then it would be well served to have this type of access to it. So we would have the parking available there as well as a road access.
Hey, Liam, it's Tom. Can I just interject?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that area of the school property. I mean, I think if you look at that as future, it's a very logical piece to develop with something. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think if we were to move forward with this parking area as proposed, obviously that would create a better reason for considering that particular location on the school property. So I think one would be a catalyst for the other.
Good point.
Right. That's a really good point, Tom. I'm going to move to this slide, which kind of, and maybe I'll try to make it a bit bigger for folks. It shows the whole site a bit better. Oh, that didn't work. Sorry, go back to this one. I got to move this way with it. So again, yeah, Tom, that's a really good point. It's like, if we are going to open this up for parking or other uses even too, then that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What I'm showing here is also, this is what I'm wanting input from the committee about is like, if we were to advance this idea, one of the questions is, okay, well, how much of these community lands are we looking at here? And before we get into the how much and like where would the boundary be, I want to talk also a little bit more about other uses. So there has been a lot of discussion in the community about increasing programming space and functionality for youth, because the community center itself has a lot of great programming space. But when we think about the youth, like the preteens to teenagers, there's actually not a ton of activity and programming space in that community center facility for that age demographic. There's excellent programming for tots and young elementary school children, and for adults and seniors. And so there's been a lot of talk in the community about this idea of a skate park.
Liam, do you see who's here?
Yes, hello, Fritz.
Hi, Fritz.
I've been, Steph doesn't like me anymore. She didn't let me in,
Oh, Jesus.
Well, I understand why, but
She wasn't letting any of us in for a while. We thought we were all in the doghouse.
I'm gonna make all these decisions by myself.
Oh, well, okay. Okay, then she likes me the least. All right, I can deal with that.
Not at all. Welcome, Fritz. We're just
All right, okay.
we're just into it now. We're just talking about I think it's 4.1, and so I'll just let Liam carry on, and you'll get the gist of it anyway.
All right, okay. Sorry for the interruption.
Not at all.
Quite all right.
Nice graphic.
So Fritz, this is you know where we are with this graphic. This is
Sorry?
you see where we are with this
Yeah.
graphic? Yeah. So
Yeah.
this community school here, soccer field, proposed community center land.
Yeah.
And then what we're talking about is, I'll just move to this graphic very quickly, is these are some recent drawings from our design team on the community center facility itself and the need for some additional parking. And so you can see we're proposing that additional parking go to the north of the site in this relatively flat land.
Right.
And then this slide is showing about how there's other discussions occurring right now, and it's not really a full public engagement at this point. We're still doing fact finding, but it is a discussion with the community school, school district 45, and the Bowen Island Children's Center about a after-school care facility. And the location I've shown it in pink here is not solidified, so let's not hold on to that as the actual proposed location. But if that were to be the location, then this idea of having parking here will serve two functions. It'll serve the after-school care facility as well as the community center. And then I was just starting to talk about also the need for additional activities for the youth. And there's a lot of momentum in the community about a skate park. And so where we've been looking at options of like, well, where could you put a skate park? And we haven't dove deeply into that idea and talked to any designers about skate parks at this point in time in terms of ideal locations. But just from a conceptual perspective, it seems to make a lot of sense that if we were having we've got the school and we've got racket courts, basketball courts, soccer fields, after school care, community center, skate park, all consolidated in one area, it seems to make a whole lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And so if we were going to try to secure this additional land here for the parking area, well, do we want to secure a little more land for a skate park? Mm-hmm. And then the reason why I left this sort of panhandle here is that there may still be an opportunity for some multifamily housing. It's very steep here, so it's not great for parking, not great for a skate park unless you're like a hardcore skater. But you may be able to do some creative work there with some multifamily housing or apartment type buildings or something. So that's why I've just left that sliver there. So that's the nuts and bolts of it. Just before we open it right up for further discussion, this option where it's, we're looking at this sort of truncated triangle piece, is this blue area is effectively 0.75 of an acre. And if we expanded it further north to allow for a skate park or something of the likes, that would be a whole acre right there. And one last comment too is that the idea of the parking would be that it's a rough and ready Bowen style parking. So we don't have budget for like a high-end, fully tarmac parking. We also don't think it would make a lot of sense to do that at this point in time because we want to get the community center built and get a feel for its use and effectiveness. And like if we were to need further expansions, is there any sense in expanding into this area where the parking would be in the future? There's a significant elevation drop, if you recall from our walking of this site. Right in this zone here, the elevation drops dramatically. You can see it on this slide. And this green area is the surface water catchment swale and basically rainwater catchment. But it is entirely possible that we could, in the future, redevelop, if this was a parking area, into some other community function or use. And so that's why I wouldn't want to spend a lot of money on developing a high-end asphalt parking area.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Liam, just another thought. You know, I think it just on Bowen, it seems every time new parking is created, it fills up almost immediately. And I look at the school and just its needs right now, and going by there down Mount Gardner Road and just looking at the level of activity in that parking area, and it's overflowing already. I don't know whether there's any good reason to think about the dynamics of the school site and this site together in terms of what the needs might be. Because it seems to me that if this is provided in the way the drawing depicts it, I would suggest that there's probably going to be people who are using the school that are going to end up using this parking because it's within a close enough proximity. And particularly if they do grow the facilities with that area that you suggested on the school property. I mean, this parking area is going to be inadequate very quickly, in my estimation, just because of the demands that the community center and the municipal hall will create in terms of traffic through here.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tom. Absolutely.
Right. And I think I didn't say this, but I should have, because to the point that you raised, Tom, this is a very high level sketch.
Yeah.
This isn't exactly what it would look like. I actually think that the parking would probably be closer to where we would have this rainwater catchment swale, and that we would probably be roughing it into this area here.
Yeah.
And it has the potential to be larger. And one critical piece that we need to keep in mind is that none of these slides show it very well, but this corner of the soccer field, maybe I'll go to this slide here, because this has the topographical contours as well. But this corner of the soccer field is slumping, and there's about a 4.5 meter height differential from where grade is, the average grade is here to the soccer field grade. It's really a significant height. So if we're going to do anything, we've got to really improve the drainage along this slope here and put down proper road base. And eventually, maybe not right away, but eventually we'll need to do something to buttress this slope from slumping any further. But that's getting into a significant amount of work and cost for retaining and rebuilding this slumping piece here. But so there is a fair amount of work that if we decide to move forward with this and we open this area up, then I think we're going to create many more opportunities that are before us right now. And we're also going to identify, okay, well, this is an area that has been neglected, and we are going to need to put some effort into to maintaining that.
Yeah. The other thing I would want to try and understand with this is that the very steep part going down to Seniors Lane, just that area in there. I think it would be important to understand whether housing would in fact be practical on that slope. I know when we walked the site, we thought that logically access to that might come from Seniors Lane as opposed to from the top. So it would be the access would come in from the bottom and then you'd step the buildings up. But I think it would be good to answer that question, because I think if for example, it really doesn't lend itself well to further residential development, there might be a temptation just to include that in with the blue part and create one larger lot going right down to the boundary that follows Seniors Lane, and just maybe retain that as a green belt. But I'm just thinking about the logistics of how all of this might work together. Pulling residential into what is going to be basically surrounded by community use may not be ideal, but it's hard to predict.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Tom. And if I might just interject here, another really big asset for this school is if we do run down here with the parking lot and that sort of thing, they could actually access a parking lot on school property there. They could open up some parking on school property with an access through there.
Yeah.
So, rather than use our parking lots, which would conflict with the community center and that sort of thing. I think we should, and I don't know about the exact shape of the property we want to look at. I think the important part is to leave a little bit of space, and you don't need a lot of space, but a little bit of space for housing. So my thought would be not to go too far towards the end. And what's more important, I think, is we don't really know the shape of it, but try to ascertain how much property we would like for the future expansion of the community center and other recreational assets. I think, and I think 1 acre would be, to my mind, would be a minimum. I think we've got to look a long way into the future here. There's certainly, this idea doesn't come, it just didn't come around the corner. You can see even on the last minutes there, that's what we were talking about. So this is just a formalized version to get into council, to get to council and see if they see what they think about it. I think, like I say, I don't think we need to ascertain the shape right now. It's more the size, but we have to have something to present to council. I think, I'm sure Jillian would certainly agree that we have to think about the future. One of the big things when the community center was being discussed was the ability to expand. And, we go back now about 4 years, and we were telling people that, yes, we'll have room to expand, and we will request some more land from the municipal property from council. So this is just an evolution of something that started a long time ago. And I'm sure willing and eager to hear everybody's thought on this. So if you want to go ahead, let's use hands on this. Okay, I see Maureen there.
Thank you, Gary, and thanks, Liam, for pulling this together. Some of Tom's comments are comments that I would have made as well. The small chunk of land on the right, the steep land, no longer makes sense to me if we're going to have parking in a potential skate park or some other community use on that part of Area 2. As well, we have talked, and it's outside of the scope of community lands, but it provides a context. We've talked about potential development along Miller Road in 1022 to 1046, and squeezing in some additional multi-family in Area 2. No, right. Does not make sense. The concern that I have, one of the concerns that I have, is that Area 2 is currently zoned for residential and for townhouse use. I believe it's the only land that we have that is zoned for townhouse use. So presumably proceeding with this is going to involve rezoning. And the remainder of this, of Lot 2, is currently zoned as park. And the intent, if you recall, in zoning it as park was to sort of keep it in abeyance until such time as we actually had a use for it. So, and I'm not certain about this, but if we are going to be looking at making at least part, and a significant part of Area 2 for future community center expansion, parking, whatever, I think we should be looking at area 3. Sorry, what is it? Area whatever, the park area. I think we should probably be looking at that as well, because we are taking land that's zoned for housing out of the mix if we were to proceed with this.
Yeah, good point. Anybody? Thank you, Maureen. David?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. A lot of the same things. I'm, Tom raised the question that I was going to raise too about that little panhandle. We're trying to cram a whole lot into a tiny area, and it certainly makes sense to, as the community center is there, to make sure that potential expansion and associated uses, could fit nicely in the area. But we were also, now I'm glad we're looking at that screen right now that looks at the whole thing, because one of the things when we walked around, we were also looking at, if you look at the park area to the north of it, yeah, that area there, we're talking about the access points are either getting something from Metro Vancouver way over on the west side, that narrow little piece at the top that we'd have to do a bunch of blasting. And if we want to be able to get in and get out, we were also talking about turning that corner right where we're talking right now and, coming back out by the community center. So it's just making sure we're thinking of the whole chunk of land, that's all. And I think we also have to recognize that we are confidentially discussing with Metro Vancouver, getting some access of the land on the north side, to provide that access point, but also potentially additional land for recreation of some sort that all associate.
We're on YouTube, David.
Oh, we're on YouTube. Yeah. Sorry. So,
Yeah.
So generally, I like what we're talking about here, it's just making sure that it all lines up with how we can use that land on the land we're calling the parkland, because we're limiting access to it, and that corner right there is really quite narrow. The corner, between that land and the land we're talking about. But certainly I support the ideas, and yeah, making the community center just that little bit larger. That's ended up with the topography we have. It's something you have to drop down that steep hill and then put the parking a little bit further along. So sure.
Liam, do you have an overlay that shows that the original one that doesn't go as far north?
Yes, not an overlay.
Just because there's lots of room for housing. Well, yeah,
this is not an overlay, but this is what the original site plan looked like.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So there was the building footprint, and then we had a bunch of parking on the north side here. And now the building footprint has grown a little bit in this direction, and so it constrains the parking. And then what we're also thinking, Jillian and I in particular, is that any future growth of the community center, so if we want to expand the recreation components of it or what have you, this is really the most obvious area to grow the community center. Yeah. So whatever parking it will be there in the beginning really will need to be relocated if we want to expand the center. And then while I'm at it, I just wanted to show this. We talked about this with the design team as well, that this is not what we would propose for the immediate solution, because you can see this is the natural grade here. And this idea is looking at, well, filling in that grade, which would help address the slumping of the soccer field and make it much more useful when it's closer to the grade of the soccer field. But this could be a future vision of that area north of that we're talking about right here, the parking area. And then you could effectively have some additional buildings and uses in that area as well. but you going back to this one here, you can see that as we want to move this building north to expand it now and into the future, we will need some additional parking somewhere else, and this is the most natural place for it.
Yeah, I guess my point is, Liam, that if the lot goes down, if we did get an acre and it went down towards the lane, more Seniors Lane, and not as far north, that way we leave some room for housing up there, and that's plenty of room for housing, but they don't need very much. So you bring that blue line that's up to the north there and bring that back. Just almost, I like the idea of, where was it, 70.75 there?
Right. So this dotted line here.
Yeah, so that leaves lots of room for housing at that end. And then you've still got access if required. I'd rather not make that a permanent roadway, but it's could be an emergency access into that area. Yeah.
Right. Fritz had his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Fritz, go ahead. I didn't have
My kind of feeling is, what everybody was kind of saying. I think making that parcel bigger obviously gives far more flexibility in the future.
Yeah.
Create a legal line that even dimensionally may be a bit challenging. And then, so I'm kind of in favor of that. With parks, like, I kind of think park connections, pathways are more important than actual park, because it's surrounded by so much park. I can see any residential neighborhood being surrounded by more beautiful park. So I think that if you live there, that's probably as good as it gets. It would be, in my mind, it would be good enough that you simply say it's all residential and there is no park, there's just park connections. And for the parking, like, if you go back a bit and you think about what happened on lot 3, where Bowen doesn't seem to realize that parking uses land, and eventually, where there is parking, there's nothing else, right? So, for instance, with the medical center, I already thought that they should have been a 2-story building with parking under it, right? Then you have 100% expansion. It's not done, but now the building is far more difficult to expand. And if you think about here, for instance, that parking, I think Liam is totally right, that the parking should just be temporary, because it will move. Yeah. All the parking is constantly moving on Bowen, right? So, yeah. And it's almost like it's delaying a real decision, because like, if that land is lower and you backfill it, which doesn't come for free, with tons of gravel and trucks and whatever, maybe you should just say, if it has to be a level lower, that's our first below grade parking, And the idea that everything comes for free, that you have to pay for parking wherever you go, except in Bowen, where parking is precious and hard to achieve, I don't understand that. Like, if people that commute can park in a parkade and they have to pay something for it, they probably do that, You could even sell garages there, like to me, it's just like in a way we're delaying it, and we're running out of land that is precious and close to the Cove. So I think that the idea that this is one big parcel that provides all kinds of opportunity until finally a decision is made how parking is delivered, right? To me makes total sense. If you have a parkade, you can put everything on it that you like. You can put a skate park on it in the future. You can put residential on it. You can put the expansion from the municipal hall on it. All these things work. And if you take that embankment there, and if you say, I'm going to blast it out for parking and I'm going to put some residential on it, well, we do all kinds of houses in West Van and North Van. We know all about blasting. And it doesn't come for free, that's for sure, right? So if that could be maintained as a little buffer where it gets too steep and too expensive and too difficult, maybe that is what happens. And if you spend the same money in that area more effectively and efficiently, then I think it just has far more to offer. So to keep the potential, it's almost more like what you're doing is you're protecting potential. And that's why I like it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Fritz. land is land. It might not be the nicest land to build on, but it is land anyway, and is usable for different things. Anybody else in there?
Yeah.
I don't see anybody.
Gary?
Maureen.
And
Okay.
the skate park idea.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we want to be that specific with one particular project for youth going forward. Are there other competing community interests that have been expressed?
Yes.
And if we want to make the suggestion or the argument of a skate park, we should have some backup when that goes to council. So, I mean, what I'm hearing is that this committee seems comfortable with what's being proposed here, but there will be others on council who, at the mention of parking, may respond somewhat negatively. So I think we should have ducks in line to respond to that concern.
That's a good point, Maureen. And I think the skate park is an example of, and you might want to go to Jillian about that, but you know, during the process of the community center, there was lots of discussion about different facilities that should be in there, whether it be a squash court or a swimming pool or a, you know, maybe pickleball court or something like that. But so it's a variable. It's not set in stone by any stretch of the imagination. It does. It picks up a fantastic demographic, the teenagers on the island, and so you know it's always been a thought out there. But I don't think we're actually doing this to put a skate park in.
Okay, I think then that's important to get across. So
Yeah.
We're talking about the uses. It's parking and another community use. For example, a skate park, a squash court, a whatever. Like
Yeah.
keep it open so that there isn't it doesn't evolve into a commitment right off the bat, because that needs more work.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing I would just mention about us. Oh, sorry, Jillian, I just saw your hand go up. I just wanted to mention about the skate park. I'm not totally enamored with this idea just from skate parks that I've seen, but the one thing I think should be recognized about it is that if a skate park is put in there, it pretty much is a permanent structure because of how it needs to be.
Concrete.
And it doesn't have a lot of alternate use possibilities when we're thinking about maybe a broader community use of that particular amenity. So I would just mention that.
That's a good point, Tom. It's a lot of concrete goes into a skate park, that's for sure. Anybody else here?
Jillian's got it.
Okay, go ahead, Jillian.
Yeah, I was just going to support the idea of leaving it open for that future use, because as Liam said, you know, we're not really sure how it's all going to play out in the community center. Is it all going to be used exactly as intended, or what do we need down the road? You know, maybe it's a skate park, maybe it's an outdoor facility that's covered so we can do programs in an outdoor way as well. Yeah. So I think, yeah, there's lots of potential, and community and recreation trends change. So
yeah,
especially in Cove, it's changed a lot, and there's no reason to assume everything is going to go back exactly to how it was. So I think this does give us potential for recognizing future needs really well.
Okay, thanks, Jillian. Good points. Daniel, I know how that, I haven't got the right in front of me here, but that lot, this lot 2, the housing part of it, like nothing was ever surveyed. There were kind of lines on a map, right?
Yeah, I mean, the areas are set in the zoning boundary.
Okay.
And so the area 3 is the community center, allows those community uses. And then beyond it is area 2 that just allows townhouse and attached dwellings.
Yeah.
So I think
does that area go right to the line there?
It's essentially where that yellow, the housing area goes up and then a little beyond, sort of to the corner of Bowen Court. Yeah.
Okay, so that does include that whole area. So if we were to bring back the top of the blue line there, the north line, yeah, bring that back down a bit and expand it towards Seniors Lane, then I would think there'd be lots of room for housing in there. You know, not an ideal landscape for sure, but that was just my thought. So that is where the housing was zoned, eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that whole area.
Yeah. Any other comments, Daniel, while I got you here?
I think just that, thinking about the parking area and recreational uses, it's like council would have to choose if they want to change the zoning. So one option would be to change the zoning and just change those area boundaries. So correct. The area that Liam has in blue or whatever area council decides, we would just make that part of area 3, the community center area. And then area 2 would just be reduced in size. The other option would be to leave the areas unchanged and do like a temporary use permit for the parking area. Okay. For where that wants to go, and that could include, community uses as well. But it's sort of options in terms of how we see it proceeding.
Yeah. Okay. I think the simplest thing would be to move the north yellow line, just move it north to where we figure we want it. I mean, that'd be the simplest, wouldn't it? Just make the housing section smaller than the community section. And then, I also go back to the traveling between the school, and then you'll have BCC and come around the corner, because we don't want people going across the field, and then we'll just move right into the community center operation over here. So back to that community campus sort of idea that was floated a long time ago. Anyway, that's so anybody else got comments?
I'd just like to make one more comment. I think what's come out of this meeting for me is obviously the site area 3 that's been designated for community use is too small. I think that's really what we're hearing loud and clear here. So I think it has to be expanded. And I think going back to Maureen's point, so it needs to be rezoned. That's part and parcel of this. And then Gary, to your point, I think moving that yellow line up to wherever it needs to be in order to give the opportunity for these future uses is, I think, what we need to decide here. And the area that I was thinking about for housing, though, was that steep stuff along that side. Yeah, I think once you get back into the community land there where it's very steep, where the community center is, back to the yellow line where it's very steep there, that's the point I was questioning. Just a bit north of that. Yeah. In there, like that's the area that I was questioning about whether the viability of it as an area for residential.
Yeah, I think the further north you get, I think the better it gets for residential.
That's exactly my point. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's really steep in here.
Yeah.
But what I don't like about making the site of the municipal hall just larger is that, and maybe Tom, you can comment on that, is that there's something about the expected uses and the value of the land. So if you just make a parcel larger, the same may happen as what we see happening on lot 3, that it's not recognized that these lands are really expensive. There's no parking provided because they get the parking for free, this in the bushes, then the parking is moved around. But I would like that if the blue one is a larger parcel that has more potential uses on it. So it's for expansion of community facilities, it's maybe for community parking, and maybe that can also have a percentage of residential on it. But then, because then you get more pressure on it, and then suddenly things become more affordable. I think parking actually creates land, that's what I'm trying to say. And we're just using it as if there's no value to it. So Tom, what do you think?
Well, I tend to agree, Fritz, but I think you've raised a really good point about this idea that there could be underground parking there because of the existing grade difference between the end of the field and what an expansion of the community facilities might look like moving north. That to me is a really smart way to think about that land. And I think parking to me in these kinds of situations, and I think this was proven out in the parking lot down where the medical center is going in now, as soon as that parking availability was created there, that lot filled up very quickly. But it, in my mind, and I think in the mind of many of the users of it, I was a regular user of it, it still felt very temporary to me and really didn't impinge on what the future may be there. And so I have the same feeling about this one. I think that the parking that we create here, unless we make it hard with pavement and all of the rest of the lighting and all the rest of the things that would come along with a sort of a commercial parking structure that has a much more permanent look to it, leaving it gravel and sort of unimproved leaves it in people's mind as something that's temporary. And I think whether we call this multi-use area or something specific to community use, to me is just semantics, really. And I think from a value perspective, what I would say is that the value equation to me is built on in the residential piece in particular, on density. So we can capture more value on the remainder of Area 2 if we like, by doing something about density that would pick up and taken away in these alternate uses. I don't see the value equation here as being the one that's critical to this decision.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Anybody else?
Yeah, Gary, I'd like to pick up on Fritz's point and where Tom was going, and I think it's really important that we see what we're doing as temporary, and as like the other parking lot was, it was actually designed and spoken of as being temporary, and so we need additional space for the community center. We're not exactly sure what or when we need it, but we do know that we need some more parking right now, so we can gravel that in, but then kind of leave the options open. And so I wouldn't want to draw hard lines that said, well, nothing else is going here, but this and that. So somehow to leave options open to see if there is still a possibility of some townhouses or apartment type things on that little steep slope, part of it. And yeah, that's, looking at that picture is interesting. The drop off is really quite considerable. So there's gonna be, a steep little gravel road down to a little flat area for some parking. And whether we can use the topography to our advantage for parking down the road, well, maybe, but let's just leave it open for now and have this temporary use because we need it.
Yeah, I think everybody's on the same wavelength here. It should be temporary. There's absolutely no question about that, because we have no concept of what the future needs are going to be, and we're certainly not digging up an asphalt parking lot. But I think generally speaking, I think we agree with land for expansion for the community center. I think there's absolutely no question about that. And I don't know if we have to define it right now. I think we have to be a little bit careful, because council is going to want to know what the residual land is. And I think we have to have that housing component in there. So I think if we try to establish, and I'm not exactly how we can do that today, but establish how much land and where the sort of line would be on that. And I don't know if we're prepared today to say this is going to be where the line is. I think maybe we could come back to council once we get agreement on the fact that we do need room for expansion, and we're going to take consideration in for the housing and that sort of thing. I think if we can get agreement from council on that, I think that's the first step forward. And then I think we've got to fine tune where the land would actually, the definition of where that land would go to. That's my thinking on it. I don't know about everybody else. I'd like to hear some comments.
Well, I think it's still better to have one big blue parcel, and yes, the municipal hall can expand on it, but then you're forced to talk and consider other users and how to work together, and maybe do buildings that are more innovative with some kind of mixed use in it. I mean, you see that more and more all over the place, like community centers in more urban areas and now in towers, so I'm saying is that, you know what I mean? It's just like, I think the yellow line moves up it's just eaten up by the community, by the municipal hall.
Mhm.
It's not really, and it kind of comes for free, and there is no reason to make better use out of the land. That's what I like about one big blue parcel all the way up to Seniors Lane, and then somehow give it either in the OCP or in the zoning, facilitate users that want to be there, and then see how the economics work a few years from now, because we are constantly running into the same issue that we're just not really putting value on land, you know? And
yeah, the unfortunate thing, and I like what you're saying, Fritz. I'd like to just take away that barrier between lot 2 and 3, I think it is. But the problem is we're going to be moving forward with the community center, you know, conceivably within 6 months, and we have to know, you know, how much land that we have there to access. I think it has to be, that part of it has to be planned. So
yeah, if I can just
do that. Go ahead, Liam.
Yeah, just to add to Gary's part, we're moving forward with updating our building permit for the project, and we need to meet the minimum parking requirements for the facility, and so the minimum parking requirements is about, I think it's 36 stalls, and with the expansion of the footprint of the building, we can't achieve that with the lot that we currently have. So that's what's driving this initially, and then we're seeing other opportunities as we move it forward.
right, I mean, sure, that's what you do, but it's exactly what I'm saying. It's just like it's just easy, cheap land. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like nobody else can do that. You know what I mean? Like,
no.
We can do it because it happen to be the municipality. You happen to have the land, and so it comes back to the thing from about
exactly.
Innovate future or not, you know?
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah, that, and I agree 100%, Fritz. But also, council is going to want, before they vote on it, council is going to want to know what you know, how much land that the community center is even thinking of accessing. So I think we have to have some kind of an idea going forward there, because they're not going to sign a blank check on that whole piece of property.
Maureen had her hand up.
Yeah,
Maureen?
a question. I'm thinking timing. Would the requirements of the building permit be met if there were a temporary use permit for parking in the area 2? Or do you need to have a rezoning through before the permit would be issued?
Liam or Daniel?
Daniel would be able to better answer
Right,
that
so if the
one.
community center itself, like what is currently proposed, doesn't meet the parking requirement, could the temporary use permit cover it?
Yeah, that's the
I
question.
mean, probably not is the reality, because I don't think I would accept that for anyone else.
Yeah.
They will temporarily have parking, so we'll let the building go ahead. I mean, I think at that point, if that was the stumbling block, I would say instead we give ourselves a variance to reduce the required parking.
But Danielle, how does it relate to Birch, which really didn't provide enough parking? We all know that already. And
That's right.
The medical center, where there's not enough parking, and somehow these buildings are built. And
well, I mean, first I'd say they're not built. They don't have building permits. Birch doesn't have an application in, but they intend to apply for a variance to reduce parking, or at least Birch does.
Okay, so that means that either our parking bylaw is in the way of achieving what we want to achieve, because everybody has to come by bicycle, or you know, the parking has to be administered consistently, because like you know, lot 3 where Birch is will have a parking issue. This is it's like a no-brainer, and the parking has to go in the balance of lot 3. And if you want to get some use, the lower lot 3, right? Then some parking has to go below grade. And Tom, what you were saying about parcel 3, where the Birches and the fire hall and everything else, that you said the best value for the community is to actually whole development because it's going to be, and there is far more potential later because then parking would go in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Tom, can you say something?
Yeah, can I just respond to that? So I think fundamentally, though, to me, I mean, my mind is pretty much made up, and I'm prepared to make a recommendation personally on this. And I think that what I hear so much out of this conversation is that the site that we have allocated for the community is too small.
Yeah.
That's fundamental to this conversation today. And to me, I think that the way to solve this, and again, parking just enunciates that problem. And I think that, to me, what we should be thinking about here, and this is what I would be prepared to recommend, is that we expand the lot 3 up to that dotted line, for example, because going back to my original point, I really feel that there's this synergy that then gets created between what happens on the school site in terms of their expansion in the future, which is very logically going to take place in that area north of the field. That is one of the most likely buildable areas of the remainder of the school site. So then if we look at how that then correlates with everything that we now create on this larger community site, to me, that's a good package. And then that still leaves the area to the north of it available to any alternate use that would be decided, and that could be left in the same zoning as it is right now. So I think what I see here is that we look to that expansion, we look at what's going to be required to achieve rezoning through council, and then we're done.
And Tom, would you move this line out to seniors?
Well, I would with the proviso that I want to know whether you could actually build on that, the end of that dog leg. My suspicions are that part there is going to be very difficult from an access and a construction perspective.
Yeah, and I think to Fritz's earlier point, it's probably less desirable because it's too expensive, but in the future, 10, 20, 30 years from now, it may be, oh, that's a great spot.
Yeah.
And I think going back to Fritz's point, I think, maybe, and I think it's a really good point to consider in other areas where there isn't this availability of land that Bowen is blessed with, because we're fighting over areas of land here, but we've got this huge piece. Whereas in North Vancouver or West Vancouver, well, West Van's a bit of an exception because they do have a large site there, but in North Van, where they're putting community amenities into the ground floor or under towers, that's because there's no land available. Yeah. And I think that here we're very fortunate that we have land that we can make decisions about now that will be important in 20 or 30 years from now.
What if we, to answer all these questions, what if we didn't actually define the piece of property at this point in time, but called it 1 acre going north of the current boundary, which I think would probably take us a little bit higher than what you were talking about there, the top of the pink line. I think it would take us a little bit higher and then further down the cliff. And we could define what we thought was good. I mean, the other option is you can always blast the parking into the bottom there pretty cheaply too, along the seniors lane. That's pretty easy to do. But is that the way we should go forward to council at this point?
But I think that I'm not sure that addresses what may be required for the building permit.
Yeah, we can define it pretty quick though.
It was, Tom, what you were saying about moving the yellow line up, I think to me that makes sense. But then, Liam, when you're doing that, can you just check some kind of a template for, as a more rigid template? Let's say, for instance, if one day in the future a parkade is butting up against the school side, right along the blue line on the left side.
Yeah.
And there's nothing difficult about it. It's actually easy because most buildings have 1 or 2 story concrete retaining walls, and parking structures are perfect for retaining. But then if somehow the size of the parcel, like a normal parking lot is 60 feet wide, right? 18 feet, right? So 60, 62 feet range, and somehow there's some kind of a logic in where these lines are set, because like there's all kinds of parcels that are far less potential to develop because the property lines are not set to actually respond to some important users, apparently parking, right? So like if you set that line randomly, maybe that's fine, but then maybe check up and down the page and kind of across the page, you know,
Yeah.
certain dimensions that seem to be more promising.
Yeah. I don't want to be too vague going into council because it'll mean that we have to come back in again to define it. But also, yeah, something like that is what. Of course, we don't know how much space that is, do we?
That's 1.2.
1.2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, something like that, you could bring that blue line back at the north or bring it up from the street a bit. I don't know if they try to get it back to 1 acre, but I mean, isn't that hopefully what we're talking about? Something like that?
Yeah. And I think if it's 1 acre or 1.2 acres, I think that doesn't really matter. It's more about like, what is a practical area, kind of to what Fritz was just talking about. It's like, and I agree with Fritz that, on Bowen, we do things sort of the path of least resistance and easy because we have land, and it feels like it's cheap because the community has these lands and what have you. But it would, if we're talking about like future, like 10, 20 years from now, or maybe it's even sooner, it would be really easy to shore up this bank with a retaining wall. We have the natural depression and the elevations beside those depressions to build something at the same grade as these with parking underneath. It would be very easy.
Yeah.
But you've got to be able to incentivize the builder, and this is again to Fritz's point, is like, well, we're often not required to be terribly innovative because we have access to the land. And so how do you drive that innovation, and how do you make the best use of every available square foot?
So on that, Leon, like if the blue line on the bottom, like where your cursor is now, if that blue line wouldn't exist, in a way it would be better for flexibility. The only reason why I said it's maybe better that there is a blue line is that I fear that everything is just going to horizontally, cheaply, once buildings go and gobble up the land. You see what I mean? So that's what I like about the blue line. But if the blue line is not there, then of course you have even more flexibility, but it's less likely that it will be used because this doesn't seem to be a property line.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Well, yeah, and I'll agree. I agree with you, and because when I think about future development of the facility and of the use of the site, when we look at this image, we have the community center and the municipal hall, and this is the steep bank right here.
Yeah.
And the easiest place for us to expand the proposed facility is on this bench, on this flat area up here. So that's expansion number one, right? So for a bigger recreation space or whatever it is, maybe it's a workshop or something. Expansion number one, and then beyond that, going into 20 years plus, like where is expansion number two? And now we're talking about moving into this space. And that's where I see what Fritz is talking about is like, well, it wouldn't be that difficult to build above this, and this becomes underground parking.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I don't, the buildings don't necessarily, expansion doesn't necessarily, I know obviously it's better if you can, but it doesn't, the buildings don't have to, in my mind, don't have to stay together as long as they're in a campus sort of situation. So I'm not too worried about elevations. If you have to walk down some steps, you can put a covered walkway across or whatever. But if you have to walk down some steps to another building, I think that would certainly be acceptable in my mind. I don't think it all has to be one building. Anyway, that's just a point.
So, can I just, not to distract from this conversation, but I did want to touch on one other element of the land use and design that has would be valuable input from this committee, and that is this orange area here in this drawing. Jillian and I noted fairly early on that access to the site is, the way it's originally envisioned, is pretty limited. So I don't, let's see if I do have something. It would be on here. This is a terrible drawing, but it does show what I were talking. What happened there? Okay. So right now, the way it is currently designed is we have this single entrance and exit off of Trunk Road. We all know it's not the greatest because we're on the crest of that hill coming up Trunk Road. We had this passenger drop-off zone. You can get 2 cars into this passenger drop-off zone. But then once you've dropped somebody off, so Jillian and I noticed right away that, imagine there's an event happening in this large multi-purpose room where you're going to have 150 people showing up. And what do you do after you drop somebody off? And this parking is all full. It becomes a congestion spot immediately, and there's nowhere to turn around. You have to go all the way down here, and you do some crazy 3-point turn and try to get out of there. And so we wanted the design team to come up with a better solution for quick drop-off pickups. The other great example we can think of is like your child was in some programming and you're coming to pick your child up and they're supposed to be waiting for you out here or somewhere. And so again, you've just got this heavy congestion area, which we don't want backing up onto Trunk Road. And so we spent Jillian and I spent a fair bit of time going down here and measuring distances. You can see that this is the actual property line. So that's the municipal property line. On this side is municipal land. On this side is the Bix land. But the soccer fence actually encroaches slightly into the municipal land. No big deal. But we're really concerned about this access. We spoke with the school and the soccer club. Both are fine with us exploring ideas to make this access better. And we've got the minimum distance that the soccer club needs to make the soccer field a full soccer field. And they basically say that we're able to go up 20 feet from this post here, and then in almost 50 feet inland here. So we basically have this whole corner to work with to make this a better zone. And then what we got from the design team after a number of back and forth is this kind of a scenario where we still have that single entry and exit point off of Trunk Road. But you can see that now we've designed it where we have 4 quick drop-off pickup spots, and we have a turnaround just after it. So you're driving in, you drop somebody off, you go here, and you can do a turnaround. The dark orange is the minimum vehicle, passenger vehicle radius requirements for turnaround. The slightly darker is the minimum radius for a community bus. So you can see we can't actually get a community bus in there to do that. The larger one is for like a school bus or like a large bus or like a fire engine. And so we were really hoping that we might be able to get the community bus in here and do a turnaround, but it's not realistic for the constraints that we have. But what this solution does provide is an option for that quick and ready pickup and drop off without having creating this massive congestion at the entrance. It then does require us to work with the school district because we will need to, well, more so even the soccer club, because we're not actually going to be encroaching beyond our land, because this is still our property line. But we are going to probably have to do some fence realignments and such. So we may not, to achieve this goal, we may not actually require any negotiations with the school around property lines, but it may just be about more fence lines. And I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware of that.
Awesome.
Liam, is there any room outside the gate or outside the, like, you know where that gate is that goes into the soccer field at the south, at the bottom end there?
Yeah,
is there
it's
any,
right here,
for example, and has there been any provision for bus off on the outside of the property? It seemed to me that there would be room there for something like that.
we are going to explore. That'll be the next thing that we're exploring, is like, well, because we can't get a bus into the site to do
Exactly.
a turnaround.
I don't think that's worth trying for.
Yeah.
No.
So then we are the next thing that we're going to look at, and we'll need to then get in discussions with the transportation committee and probably TransLink itself, is like, you know, okay, well, where along here is a safe bus stop?
Yeah.
And can we, and Scott Slater, the principal, is totally on board with us looking at, like, okay, well, we, you know, where do we get a good spot for a lay-by without constraining too much because we also have this multi-use path that we are constructing here. Mm-hmm. So we've got to keep that in consideration too.
Well, that looks good.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think that's a great solution there. Any questions on that? I just want to move back to try to get a recommendation out of this 4.1. Tom, I know you had something. Liam, I think or just something that we can take to council. I think it has to include approximately 1 or 1.1 to 1.2 acres. And the location.
3 recommendations now.
Okay, great.
And Maureen's. Well, the one that Liam provided, that the committee recommend that council approve the expansion of area 3 of lot 2 of the community lands to a maximum of 1.2 acres for the proposed lot lines in the corresponding report for the purposes of temporary parking and consideration of future expansion of the community center facility.
Okay.
That sounds good.
So I just thought there was a note earlier on, possibly Maureen had made it about parking and then providing examples of specific uses. Would that leave the, like, skate park, pickleball? No?
That can come up in conversation.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
You've got civic here. Do you prefer that, Maureen? Councillor?
I prefer it to, sorry, prefer it to
civic use. Future expansion of the community center and other civic uses.
I'm totally fine with Liam's suggested recommendation.
Okay. Tom, how does Liam sound to you?
I'm in agreement with that.
Okay, if we can go through that one more time, Steph, and then we'll have a vote.
The committee recommend that council approve the expansion of area 3 of lot 2 of the community lands to a maximum of 1.2 acres per the proposed lot lines in the corresponding report for the purposes of temporary parking and consideration of future expansion of the community center facility.
Yeah.
Where I need clarification is what exactly are the lot lines that are behind this recommendation?
What we see on the screen?
To the north end, or? Yeah.
They're not, I mean, they're not lot lines. They're just area, like zoning area lines.
Right.
So we're not extending down to senior.
There's the other one, Maureen. No.
That one makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
This seems to align with what Fritz was saying and what Gary was saying about leaving this area to the north as it currently is zoned, and not getting into that land. This will be adequate for the community center needs, you know, immediately, and does, you know, leave options for use of these lands too, for other future development needs as well.
Is that one or 1.2 acres, Liam? Can you measure that?
Yeah, that it disappeared here, but and this is a real spitball. We can't, you know, this is literally just me doing it rough and ready for the purposes of this discussion, but it's, you know.
You want to put approximately 1.2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it disappeared, sorry.
Did you want to say like going to the north? Or
Can't go any other way.
Yeah.
Good point.
I guess my only other comment would be how we describe the parking aspect. I mean, I think.
I think that can be done verbally. I don't think we have to describe it in the recommendation.
If we say temporary parking, that helps.
Yeah.
Well, no, but my point there, Liam, is that if it's going to be actually required parking to meet the building permit requirements, I'm not sure that it's accurate calling it temporary.
Oh, right. Good point. Thank you, Tom.
Point is right.
Yeah, so additional parking. So we go back to, so for the purposes of additional parking to satisfy, or we say,
So I would talk about present and future parking needs or something to that.
requirements present to meet present and future parking requirements.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So
I think we got to be a little bit vague. I mean, we can talk about the children's center too and that sort of thing, access to that. But I think that can be done verbally. I don't think we have to put all that in the recommendation.
Okay.
now I just confirmed the image we're looking at is what's going to be in the report that goes to council. Is that correct?
I would think so, yes.
Yes?
if that's what people agree with, I think that makes sense.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
I am too.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll put that in the recommendation as well, that the proposed lot lines as presented at this meeting on this slide.
Or, yeah, not, what is the term that you use, Daniel? It's not lot line, it's
Oh, it's the zoning boundary.
zoning boundary.
Zoning boundary.
Zoning area boundary.
Yeah. So
Zoning area boundary.
Yeah.
And Steph, if we could trouble you
Yes.
to read it one more
Okay.
time, just with all these changes.
The council approved the expansion of area 3 of lot 2 of the community lands to a maximum of approximately 1.2 acres.
By a maximum of.
Maximum and approximately.
It's the total, that's troublesome. Just kidding,
But,
just kidding.
okay, just get rid of maximum and just say by approximately.
Okay. Approximately 1.2 acres for the proposed zoning area boundary as presented at the March 4th Mayor Standing Committee meeting and in the corresponding report for the purposes of additional parking to meet present and future parking requirements and consideration of future expansion of the community center facility.
Could you
Good.
pop that up so we can actually see it? Jeff?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop.
And I
Liam?
don't like consideration doesn't. Mhm.
Jillian, go ahead.
Sorry, Liam, I was going to ask before you stopped, if it'd be possible to measure that land, not including the steep slope, just to make sure that we are actually encompassing the possibility of the skate park, which couldn't be on that sloped land. It would have to be to the north of the parking. So I was just pulling up the report that we did, or that John prepared before, and it was only about 1/8 of an acre, like the Peachland skate park that we were sort of modeling an idea
Right.
after. Yeah, so just checking that was.
So the original polygon was 0.75 acres, and that was
Okay.
more than enough for the parking that we require. The larger polygon that was originally on the screen was 1 acre, and that went further north. And that was, you know, significantly more than what we really do need right now. This one here, if it requires, sorry, 0.1 of an acre?
Or 0.125. Well, that's the Peachland one. That's 5,400 square feet.
Right.
Which, yeah.
Okay.
Can we put expansion of the community center facilities instead of facility? It doesn't necessarily have to be the building, eh? I don't know. What does everybody think about that?
Yeah, you said that originally. I think that's better. Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe instead of consideration, I would suggest accommodate.
Thank you.
Good.
Phew.
Could I suggest getting rid of her by approximately 1.2 acres as shown in the proposed blah blah, and then delete as, so just to present it.
Sorry.
Okay, shown in the proposed zoning area around boundary presented, so delete as.
Right.
And then in the latter part, get rid of all the, I would suggest, and just say for additional parking to meet. So get rid of the purposes of creating for additional parking. And then, yeah, so you're just going.
Yeah.
You're
Present and
deleting
future.
the purposes of creating. And you're picking it up for additional parking to.
I see. Okay.
You see what I'm doing?
I think so. There.
Yeah.
And then, and for future expansion of community land facilities. So we've got way too many verbs happening here. Little prepositions.
So you want to get rid of accommodate?
Yeah.
Sorry, Tom.
And for.
No problem.
Yeah. The shorter, the better.
Yeah, that's good.
Half size. That's awesome. Okay, is everybody in favor of that? I will move that. Yeah.
I'll second it.
Second in there somewhere.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Tom. And if there's any further discussion, okay, I'll ask the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
You got them all there, Steph?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody in opposition?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Well, that is amazing. That is a huge, huge step forward. That's really great. Thank you very much, everybody, for that. Now, being very conscious of time, so much for our 2 hours, eh? But that was well done. It really was.
Yeah.
Just another business, which is kind of a catch-all. And I'll very quickly, and Liam, you can add anything you want to this, but I was just going to talk about, because even in the last meeting, we talked about where everything was on the updates and that sort of thing. And I'll tell you that piece of the Cove that has been denuded at this point in time is going to be very busy in the next little while. The fire hall obviously is going ahead. The fence is up. I don't know if anybody's seen it. And so you're going to start seeing some land clearing very soon. The community center and I think they're still preparing the tender documents. Would that be right, Liam?
Yes.
Okay. And so that I think on the present trajectory, if all's well, looks like October, November start, Liam?
Yeah, if all goes well, yes.
Yeah, if all goes well. Health center, I think I'm surprised they haven't broken ground, but they have cleared and they are definitely going ahead. And that'll be, I would think, starting up in the next couple of months. DK Harris rental property. Liam and I went and had a tour of that, and it's going to be absolutely fabulous. So there's going to be just an amazing different diversity of accommodation in there. They've really done a knock-up job there, and I guess they're talking also November-ish for occupancy. What else have I got? Birch, they're moving ahead, albeit they're a little bit behind the other pace of the other operations. The Snug Cove sewer is under consideration. Of course, that's something that's held us up in the Cove, and you know, any new projects going forward are definitely going to be sensitive to that issue. So it's we're definitely working on it, and we don't have a timeline yet, do we, Liam?
No.
And the Cove Bay Water, which is an incredible operation, is moving along quite nicely, and I'm not sure when they're going to get it done, but it's getting very close. It's a huge operation if anybody's driven in there to see it. Anyway, that's just sort of an update on those things. Liam, have you got anything you want to add in there?
I'll just add that what's happening with the Birch site is that we provided them with a temporary or a
Use permit.
Like sorry, not a temporary use permit. It's an agreement to enter and construct in, so that they can get in there and also clear the site for their project as well. And we're wanting to seize that opportunity while the health center has done their work, and the remaining clearing on the fire hall has also been done. So that's trying to minimize the disruption in the neighborhoods and the community by doing it all at once. We did get a correspondence the other day on that kind of issue, where could we try to coordinate projects so that we minimize disruption in the community.
May I ask, with the DK Harris project?
Yes.
The main floor, or part of the main floor, is commercial use. Do they have any plans for that at this point that they can?
I think they're Maureen and Liam, you can confirm this, but they are in conversations with different people on it. At the present time, it's just I think it's one space of either 12 or 1,500 square feet, but they would break it up if they had to. But yeah, they are in conversations with different people, I think. Is that sort of the way you read it, Liam?
Yeah, and they're open to other ideas too. So if there are other interests, then you know, I've encouraged them to connect with David and Rob.
I was going to ask the same question, and one of the things that we talked about a while ago was shared office space, and I don't know look into the feasibility of that. So
that's their still on the radar. So it's still an option that they're considering, but there is other options that are being proposed too. So yeah, I
like the pool hall option personally.
Yeah. And there's some really neat accessible suites on the ground floor. So it's wheelchair accessible too. So that's pretty neat to see.
What have they got, 4 down there, Liam?
I can't remember the exact number, at least 2.
Yeah, no, it's they've really thought it out well. They're keeping it simple, but there's a lot of amenities in there for sure.
I had a question that goes back to Liam's discussion about the entry and the turnaround and so on. You know, back to the community center and how a bus would have a drop-off spot. One complicating matter is that we've just let a contract on the multi-use path that is going to do some changes at the divergent point where Mount Gardner Road and the main road. And I don't know exactly what we're going to do there, but that's where the school buses park all the time. And that's a good bus drop-off spot, but that might be changing. I have no idea what the plans are. I looked at them and I couldn't quite figure it out for that area. So that might affect the ability for a drop-off spot. I don't know. It should just be checked out.
Yeah,
that'll be in the next phase too, eh?
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, David, is the one of the nice things with our bus is that it's quite nimble. And so I also don't want to spend too much time on the bus drop-off spot and reconfiguration of any existing designs until we get this project to tender, the community hall, that is. And so once we get a signed package and a vendor on board to begin the project, I think we can look at that with more earnest. We'll look at it from a conceptual level at this point in time, but I think we won't dive into detail on that until later. Yeah, Patrick? Can't hear you.
Patrick?
Still can't hear you. Yeah, okay. How's your sign language?
Yes.
Mine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna have to let that go, I guess, eh?
Yeah.
Want to put it in the chat, Patrick?
Well, Patrick, I'll touch base with you. I'm imagining it's about the multi-use path and this bus issue and trying to coordinate those two things.
Let's see if he comes back. He's working on it there.
Typing up a comment.
Any other conversation on this part of the program on the open section here? Because we're going to move to a closed. Anybody have any comments?
Oh.
All right.
Oh, it's exciting. The multi-use path design will not ...
Oh, perfect.
reduce space available for bus drop-off.
Excellent.
Just wanted the drama, Patrick.
Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Patrick.
Like a marionette. Okay, so 4.3 is to move to a closed meeting, and the recommendation is that the Mayor Standing Committee on Community Lands move to a closed meeting pursuant to Community Charter Section 90-1-alpha. I'll move that. Second to David, all in favor? Aye. Okay, looks like we got everybody. Fritz, you're in.
Well, kind of, we'll have to leave pretty soon, so.
Okay, well, this will be pretty quick. So the next.
Hold on, I'm just going to take us offline. Sorry, one moment, please.
Okay, I'm just going to say the next meeting at the end of this
Oh.
will be TBA. There is a 5.1, which is a development potential on Bowen Island. I think that is an information